All right, Bitcoin Stoa conversation with Aleks Svetski, September 14th, 2023. Three, two, one. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Bitcoin Stoa. Thanks for being here. As a reminder, this is a community funded project, so if you enjoy listening, you can support us by sending some sats to the QR code on our homepage at bitcoinstoa.com, or you can boost us some sats through Fountain. And just as an FYI, you can actually be paid to listen to podcasts like this using Fountain. So I would highly recommend checking that out. Current Moscow time is 37:52 at block 807-634. And with that said, it's my honor to welcome back Aleks Svetski to talk about Spirit of Satoshi. So Aleks, welcome to the Stoa. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you as well. So I don't want to mess around. We got an hour, 55 minutes now. So I want to kick things off with just a general question that I'd love to hear your perspective on, and that is for people who basically have no idea, have never heard of a language model, what is a language model, and is it artificial intelligence as it's commonly labeled?
Uh, well, let's answer the second question first, and that is, I don't believe artificial intelligence is a name that should be given to language models per se. I think they're even the terminology language model. Sorry, the terminology artificial intelligence is a little bit misleading because I doubt that human beings, and particularly the nerds and the scientists, understand intelligence. I don't think any of us really understand what the fuck intelligence is.
No.
And we've got ideas, we've got these sort of loose definitions. We're probably to some degree got a decent understanding of like more cerebrally oriented intelligence. So like stuff that's more intellectual. But outside of that, I think there's many gaps in just the notion of intelligence, and then also the notion of consciousness, which is an even bigger sort of, I would say, overarching kind of thing. My sense is that, some people say that consciousness emerges from intelligence. Others are like intelligence is sort of like a emergent from consciousness. Who knows? Like there's too many unknowns for anybody to have like a really concrete opinion on. I tried to grapple with this early this year and didn't really come to any conclusions actually, other than we don't know shit. But to kind of bring it back to the language models. These are essentially, these language models aren't really intelligent. They are sophisticated probability machines that are very good at like autocomplete. And I'm sure everybody's used Gmail at some point, or Google Docs or something like that, where you can kind of see the sentence be completed and you press tab and it completes the sentence for you, right? Or I mean, just autocomplete on your phone, right? Like, and all of that sort of stuff. So, what we've kind of discovered as a society with these language models is that language is largely a pattern thing, and maybe it isn't so embedded in intelligence as what we thought, right? Like if you go back and read a book, there was a famous one that went around for a number of years called Superintelligence by a guy called Nick Bostrom. And I remember reading that when I was younger and thinking that, holy shit, AGI is like gonna take over as soon as it like solves a couple of little problems, then it's all over. But I reread the book earlier this year. I think it was in March, actually, on my way to Costa Rica. And man, I read it. I was like, man, what is this fucking junk? Like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read. And I came away like back then, like in that book, there's a specific section of it that says language is an AI complete problem. And what that means, an AI complete problem, means that by the time, the only kind of AI that can solve this problem is something that is sentient, something that is like humans, that is generally intelligent. And the assertion of the author was that by the time we are able to talk with machines, or we've solved the language problem, the machines will have hit that inflection point where they become generally intelligent and then super intelligent, and then they rule the world and it's all over. Well, lo and behold, we cracked language, and We ain't got none of that. So, big for the nerds. So anyway, to kind of tie that initial question off, it's like these things, are not dangerous outside of, and we'll get into this later, but they're not dangerous outside of, the way any other sort of social media kind of tool is dangerous, which is, if that becomes your central source of truth, then, there's the potential for you to dumb yourself down or kind of like narrow all of your opinions or model of the world into that frame. But other than that, these things aren't sentient. They're not conscious. They're not intelligent by any stretch of the imagination. They use probabilities and large numbers to produce sentences that have some sort of syntactic sense, I guess. And yeah, as far as I can tell, we're nowhere near intelligence. I think, we're in the age of hysteria where something cool comes out and we extrapolate it forward in an exponential pattern. Same thing we did with the lockdown, same thing we did with viruses, same thing we did with that we're doing with aliens now. Like, same thing. We just overhype everything, right?
Yeah.
And language models are another one of those examples.
Yeah, and it's like AI has turned into this buzzword and sort of evolved a life of its own, and it's totally out of it's like the people who are talking about AI most are the people who least understand anything about AI or even intelligence as as a fundamental concept. And I think there's almost always a point where when you get into the weeds of things that we don't truly understand, language becomes a very limiting tool to explain a phenomenon that we don't fully grasp or that we actually can't explain in sort of human terms, right? And even when it comes to health, it's like you don't actually have to understand the pure magic of how the body heals and organizes itself to understand how to be healthy, right? And sometimes all the energy we waste trying to explain these concepts or trying to, do the gymnastics to try and make people think we understand them ends up being just a total fucking waste of time. So, so the main reason I want to talk to you today was all about Spirit of Satoshi, which is this, from what I understand, sort of a domain-specific language model that you're spearheading that covers the domain of Bitcoin. So I guess I really like the framework of why, how, what. So let's start with why. Why did you decide to create Spirit of Satoshi? And at this point in time, it's September 2023. Why did you create it, and what is the objective? And you can frame that in as long term or shorter term as you want. But really curious as to why you created it.
Yeah. So to add a little bit of color there, I started out the year kind of a bit disillusioned with Bitcoin businesses in general. I was like, man, fuck this. I don't think I want to run another Bitcoin company because I don't want to deal with regulators or financials and all this sort of stuff. And then, the whole AI thing popped off. And, me being interested in books and writing and language and psychology, I found language models really fascinating. I was like, holy shit, there's potentially something here. And I just went down the rabbit hole, started asking the deeper questions, and very quickly found, like, as I said, this sort of unfounded hyperbole of people, and particularly sort of just the classic nerd archetype, oh my God, we figured out general intelligence, like this is it. 3 months, 6 months from now, at the rate of this thing is changing, machines are going to take over the world. And as soon as I hear something like that, just shit starts to rub me the wrong way. So I was like, okay, I got to dig a little bit into this. And the more I dug, the more I found that no, these are probability machines. And then I started seeing like how just how annoying it was to use something like ChatGPT in the way that I wanted to use it. Like, I was trying to use it as a writing assistant, and I found that I was just like rewriting everything. I spent all day fucking prompting it, trying to get it to talk like in a particular way so that I actually use something out of it. I was like, this is fucking garbage. And I thought, hey, is there a way that we could maybe use this language model technology to build characters and maybe have these specific characters be on call, right? So the actual first thing we tried to do was build a Jordan Peterson model, actually. And honestly, that failed miserably. We tried to do what's called like a retrieval enhanced model. So you use OpenAI's API to speak to a corpus of Jordan Peterson's data. And it's kind of like you see these people running around every day saying, oh, train your AI on your own data.
Yeah.
We did that approach. Now, that whole phrase is wrong. First of all, you're not training it on your own data, because training a model is a completely different methodology than taking some data, turning it into numbers, and then having a model reference that data. That's not training. And that's what all of these things that you hear out there when people talk about training it on your own data, learn to read your PDFs, read like a Warren Buffett AI, right? It's like, take this report, summarize it. You have not trained the AI on that data. All it's doing is you've taken the whole report, you've broken it up into chunks, and you've turned each chunk into a number that a pre-existing language model can read and then interpret the meaning of that piece.
So it's really just a retrieval database.
It's literally all it is. So these are called retrieval enhanced language models, right? And all it is just ChatGPT having some stuff injected into the prompt. So you could actually do this manually. You could look at Warren Buffett's report. You can take a paragraph out, copy, paste into your prompt, and say, please, in the voice and tone of Warren Buffett, reference the above paragraph and give me a summary on what is being said. And you could do that with everything, and then you can summarize everything, and you kind of like take it through a few layers. All of these retrieval enhanced models are doing that in an abstract manner, right? So they do that programmatically for you, but it's just ChatGPT under the hood. So anyway, we took that approach and we were kind of like disillusioned with it. And one of the things we did at the time, we were like, oh, we'll mess around with Jordan Peterson and a couple different characters. One of them was Satoshi. But as I did that, two things hit me. One, that retrieval enhancement is like, not as mind-blowing as we thought. And number two, I thought, man, we're not really solving a problem here. Like, so what, you've got a character in your pocket, but what are you going to do with them? Like, ask Jordan Peterson what he ate for breakfast. No, like it kind of gets a little bit boring. So we're like, what's a real problem that we could potentially solve here? And the problem that dawned on me was, hey, in the next decade or two, somewhere between 100 million to 1 billion people are going to ask the question, why Bitcoin? What is Bitcoin? How do I use it? Where do I get it? Blah, 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 right? The 1,000,001 questions that sort of come out of that rabbit hole. And I thought, okay, well, most people, after a period of time, get a little bit sick of answering the same thing over and over again. Answering things in person as well is always more effective. Effective, but it's not very efficient. Answering things at scale, through podcasts and stuff like that is more efficient, but it's not as effective. Could we kind of get a blend between effectiveness and efficiency using a language model by taking everything that's ever been said, written, thought about Bitcoin, curating it very well? So like not doing what OpenAI did, which is train their model on the mainstream, but like train it on what we select, and we can select better because we're Bitcoiners and we understand the nuance. So could we do that? Could we actually build a model, and could that act as some sort of utility for orange pilling, educating, taking people down the rabbit hole, etc.? So that was the original vision and the mission, and why I sort of went down that path. Has that changed? Has that evolved? Kind of. So at this stage, we're still intent on getting the actual language model built out. And, we're doing that alongside the community, alongside a whole lot of programmatic methods. We're pretty confident that in the next month, 2, 3, and at least by the end of the year, after a few iterations, I think we'll have a pretty solid Bitcoin language model. What we do with that language model then is another question or another story. Is like, how do we productize that? How do we turn it into a service? How do we make that useful, viable, available, etc.? So that's another thing that we're still planning out. But fundamentally speaking, the intent is to have it, at the very least, be an alternative offering to something like ChatGPT that is more likely to say something like, so if you ask ChatGPT about Bitcoin today, it'll probably tell you something like, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency similar to Ethereum and others built on blockchain technology. To most people, they're like, oh, okay, that's right, because that's what they understand in the mainstream. To you and I, that's like, the fuck does that even mean? Like, what is blockchain technology anyway? Like, what the fuck is these other cryptos? Why is Bitcoin? So, like, means nothing.
It's a shitty answer.
It's a shitty answer, exactly. So our one, we're hoping by running this training from scratch, it should say something more like, Bitcoin is a new form of sound money, unlike fiat money and other cryptocurrencies, that, that uses a unique consensus model to, produce a set of fixed and immutable rules. It should say something more like that and less like what the mainstream should do. If we can nail that, I think we have a good starting point to then maybe do some other things. Like, later on you can do retrieval enhancement. So you can like point to particular articles, point to particular videos. You can start to do some more intelligent stuff, but like, you just got to get the language right first. And that's a whole game of, changing the weights and biases so that you fundamentally change the probabilities of what words come out later. So anyway, I hope that answers the question kind of.
Yeah, it does. And I think orange pilling is sort of like an art and a science. And you're right. Or when you talk to someone in person, it's so much more effective because you can actually ask the right questions to understand where this person is in their journey and be able to give them resources or the right questions to be asking based on the stage that they're at right now. And it'd be interesting to have Spirit of Satoshi be sort of this dynamic, almost conversational model where when you ask it, what is Bitcoin? Maybe the first question it asks is, what do you understand about money? Do you understand the properties of money? Like because the thing I've been working on these days is whenever someone asks me about Bitcoin, I'm actually trying to respond with more questions than answers because I realized that my assumptions of where this person is or what they need to know, if they're not grounded in any actual facts of understanding that person, they often just don't lead anywhere, or they're just shitty answers. And one of the things that really hit me when I heard you talking about this, I think it was with Breedlove, was this notion that Google solved the problem of search, right? There's a ton of websites out there on the interwebs, and Google helps you find the right website for what you're looking for. But it almost seems like instead of actually being a utility to help people research, now Google is essentially the answer, right? To where people offshore their thinking. So they don't actually have to think anymore. They just ask Google and Google gives them the answer. And I think the vulnerability there is if Google is captured, Google can essentially give people whatever information the state wants them to receive, and then that gets interpreted as truth. So this notion of Spirit of Satoshi being sort of this tool to mitigate the risk of language being regulated by the state in order to determine people's truth, right? If what is contained in Google often becomes literally the truth for people. And if the state doesn't want people to understand Bitcoin, all it has to do is force Google to say bullshit about Bitcoin, to say something bad. Bitcoin is bad for the environment. Bitcoin, whatever, all the FUD. And so just the idea of being able to create a language model that is independent of state control or state imposition in terms of them doing with it what they want really hit me. It's like, yeah, in order to preserve truth about Bitcoin, and in order to give people a really good resource for understanding Bitcoin, it has to be done outside of the mainstream noise. And just the idea of having a community of Bitcoiners create high signal resources inside of this domain specific language model that is focused on Bitcoin so it can do it better than anyone else and actually have truth embedded into it. To me, it was like, that's almost like an existential necessity for Bitcoin to be able to live on free of the risk of being manipulated by, the Googles of the world. And just the idea of someone being able to go into a computer interface, ask questions anywhere, anytime, in any language about anything related to Bitcoin and actually receive truthful responses or better questions is that is the ultimate scalable orange pilling tool that I think it's not nice to have. It's actually, like you said, if we want to orange pill 100 million to a billion people, that's actually the only way to do it at scale, I think, and preserve quality.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on something interesting there. It's like this idea that, there's this whole drive chain conversation going on at the moment, right? And the nerds, once again, they think that if we only just add this feature to Bitcoin, we'll win. If we can allow people to build shitcoins on Bitcoin, then there's going to be no more shitcoins. And they don't it's such a poor understanding of human psychology. It's why nerds are so socially awkward. And I tease them tongue in cheek because when I was young I was quite a nerd, and I had zero social skills. It was it was not until I started like trying to understand human psychology that I got a little bit more, I guess grounded and also more humble in my understanding of like how to interpret human behavior, because human behavior is not just a simple algorithm. Like maybe a language model is an algorithm. It is a law of large numbers, it is probabilities, and to some degree humans have probabilities and habits and stuff like that built into them, but we're far more dynamic. And you can't just replicate a human being into a program. It doesn't work that way. This is like really where the fundamental disconnect is with people thinking that a machine is going to turn into something sentient. Like it just doesn't. I don't think it works that way. So anyway,
I would agree
coming
with
back
you.
to so coming back to Bitcoin, it's like Bitcoin's not going to win just because we're going to add some extra features through drive chains and magically everybody's now going to find utility in Bitcoin. It's like Bitcoin is a psychological battle. Like it is a sociological battle. Like it's something like it's economics. Like the cost of being wrong about Bitcoin far outweighs the cost of being wrong about the next fucking NFT or the next iPhone, or the next
Yeah.
computer. Technological, like technological opportunity costs are far smaller than the opportunity cost of being wrong about money. And that goes both ways, right? Like, just because you're the first to get an iPhone doesn't mean you're going to have some extraordinarily big upside, because everybody else will end up with an iPhone as well. But if you're the first to get Bitcoin, you have a massive upside because it takes so long for people to follow. So, the stakes are much higher. So to sort of tie off that idea is that the battle for Bitcoin is going to be one more in the field of educating people on why something like Bitcoin matters than it is by creating another feature or another trinket that you sort of slap on and try and make it a better payment system or make it another shitcoin system or something like that. Human psychology is not so fickle and it's not so simple. And yeah, I think if we're going to try and like orange people, we need to understand who they are. We need to find that hook, and then we need to relate it back to Bitcoin somehow. And if we do that, then we have an opportunity to more effectively orange pill people.
Yeah, and for me, that hook is always trying, like people love to complain. I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of things to complain about today. Maybe that's a better way of wording it. And so everyone has their own individual pain points, and almost every pain point has a tether in money at some point, right? Some of them are abstract, some of them are very non-obvious. And most of the questions I ask are about trying to find out, like, what is someone's chief pain point in life? And how do I connect that with money? And how do I use that to stimulate some interest in people understanding money from a first principles basis? Because it's really not that complex. And then you've created a foundation for them to be able to assess what is the best money. And that all those roads inevitably lead to Bitcoin. But starting with the Bitcoin conversation without a strong foundation makes it a very fragile thing where like you might get someone to be interested in it, but it's so fleeting that it's not salient enough for them to actually lean into it further. It's just this other fancy thing, an investment or whatever they call it. And the just the idea of like I work for a health network, and our whole concept of creating a digital community is collective sense making. Is like how do we take the if we have 1,000 people in this network and each of them are working with people on their health, and one person has an insight in the network in Norway, how do we facilitate the process of that person's insight becoming the community's insight, where every single person connected to that network now has this insight that they can apply in their own lives? And to me, Spirit of Satoshi is sort of like you get this emergence of collective intelligence when you connect a bunch of minds together, sharing their insights, sharing their understanding, and be able to compile them into this model that can then be accessed by anyone, anywhere. To me, that is the ultimate way to sort of curate everyone's insights or ways of explaining Bitcoin, and putting them into a tool that's available to everyone with an internet connected device. And I think that is the path to curating collective intelligence, is having a software tool that facilitates that. It's not to say that the software itself is intelligent, but the software becomes something that can extract the collection of human intelligence that's being fed into it. So it's
Mm-hmm,
not more
mm-hmm.
intelligent than the combination of the data being put into it, but it's the compiling machine that allows us to sort of extract out these collective insights that wouldn't otherwise be able to be possible if those insights happen in isolated patches. So I think,
Totally.
yeah, I think the intelligence of the people curating this data gets misconstrued as being the intelligence of the thing itself, whereas it is. I don't know if that's making any sense, but
No,
that
no, it
kind of
is.
hit
Yeah,
me
yeah,
where
yeah.
it's like doesn't mean the software is intelligent. It's just compounding all of the human intelligence to create this thing that couldn't be created individually. Um, and so what? So you're creating this as a way to preserve truth, as a way to create an orange pilling tool that can be used at scale for the next, billion users that come into Bitcoin and want to learn about it or understand it. Um, and back to that notion of people going to Google for truth. Like, just think of the game theory of Google. Google starts to understand what Bitcoin is. They want to stack as many sats as they can for the rest of the world. How easy would it be for them to just put in some way of delaying people onboarding into the system for a year while they stack cheap sats, and then they switch the algorithm, and then they point to good information, and then the whole world pumps Google's bags. To me, it's like that. I don't think Google would necessarily. I don't think it wouldn't be it wouldn't be good for Google to do that, but it actually would. They're financially incentivized to do that in a way, right? And so it's kind of, we need to mitigate that risk in some way by having an alternate path for people to learn about Bitcoin, where they're not dragged into the cryptocurrency world, where they're not dragged into the easy path of being fed a narrative that says Bitcoin is bad, just to delay them participating in the world's monetary network until they can't participate with the same early advantage. So how does this thing actually get created? Like, I'm sort of logging in and, helping to train Spirit of Satoshi every Saturday morning. I go and answer some questions, do some FUD busting and all that kind of stuff. But to someone who doesn't understand how this actually is being done, what approach are you taking to incentivize the Bitcoin community to come in and feed this software with good quality information? And how do you go about making sure that the information is actually good? Like, who says it's good or bad? What are the mechanics
Mm-hmm.
of how this thing actually gets created? I'm very curious to hear you
Yeah.
explain it.
So I'll explain that in 1 second. I just wanted to touch on one point there, what you mentioned with respect to it's very easy for Google to do XYZ to delay things. And like, yes, there is an argument for, the nefarious side of things. There's also just the straight up argument for just using status quo information. Like a lot of these large language models are just trained on what's on Wikipedia. And what's on Wikipedia? Like the same old dog shit about, Bitcoin's a cryptocurrency built on blockchain technology, whatever that means, right? So that real nuance, like unless you understand the domain, you're just not going to find it there. So like this is why every single model, so it's not just ChatGPT, it's like all the open source models, the llamas, the falcons, the mosaics, the red pajamas, like all these other models out there, they're all trained on the same fucking garbage. So like probabilistically speaking, they're all going to basically spew out something similar. Now, what's interesting is they're all actually quite good at producing like technical information. So like, you ask something technical about Bitcoin, like, to explain a BIP or to, explain how private keys work, or to explain like, what's SHA-256 and how does mining work and all that sort of stuff. Like a lot of that stuff is good. But as soon as you start like leaning into like the philosophy or the economics about it, like you ask it about, why is a fixed supply of money a good thing for society? Like you'll get something like, well, it's not good or bad, it's just a different approach because
Mm.
as has been seen, a small amount of inflation helps society like increases progress. It's like, no, it doesn't. Like small amount of inflation does not help that. But so like that mainstream sort of like
Yeah.
um midwit, like what's the word I'm looking for? Overton window worth of information is what all these models are trained on. So this is the importance of having a alternative. So it's not just for nefarious reasons, it's just for classic ignorance and stupidity reasons.
Yeah.
That people just think that shit's normal. People think inflation is just a fucking normal thing that we should have. And I think it's important to obviously have an alternative to that. So anyway, coming back to your second question, how does this all work? So language models live and die by the data that's fed into them. There's this narrative that ChatGPT was trained on the whole internet. That's actually false. It was trained on a very, 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 very small subset of the internet, like less than 1%. And what it is, it's like there's so much data on the internet, but very little of it can actually be used to train AI because it's not clean. It's not tagged, it's not labeled, it's not structured in such a way that you can just feed it to a model, right? So what you need to do is you need to, spend a lot of time, money, and energy structuring data in a particular format, whether it's chunks, whether it's question and answer pairs, whether it's like paragraphs of like text about a particular topic, whatever it is, like there's a whole, series of data formats. And all of that needs to be in some way representative of what you want the model to produce later. And you need to get all of that. You need to, obviously you need to collect it. You need to curate it. You then need to, clean it. You then need to format it. And then you need to feed it into a model so that you can train it. And what you're doing during the training process, honestly, is really simple, is you're playing a game of next word prediction. So that's essentially what you're doing, is like you're feeding it a paragraph of text. The model will basically mask words in that text, and it'll try and guess the right word that's supposed to go in those masked places. And depending on the accuracy with that, that feeds back into the model to go and change the weights and biases to increase the probability that the words in those masked positions actually go there. And it does this on multiple rounds. Like, this is what neural net training is, essentially. And I'm simplifying things here, but like trying to say it in a way that
keep it simple.
understand.
Yep.
So what we're doing with Spirit of Satoshi is we are trying to get the Bitcoin community involved in the process of the data curation, the data cleanup, and the data creation, like that element there. And we're doing that through a couple tools. Number one, there's a tool called the Nakamoto repository, where anybody anywhere in the world can just like submit a piece of data that they think might be relevant to such a language model. Could be anything. Could be a new essay they read by Breedlove. Could be a book that they read by some Austrian economist or whatever. They can go to the Nakamoto repository. I don't have the link off the top of my head, but if they go spiritoftosatoshi.ai, there's a link there. And you can search for it, see if it's already been appended. And if it's not there, you can upload it. You can either put a link or a text box or whatever. And every day we go through and we just approve what's good. Obviously, we don't approve what's bad, right? So that's part of the collection phase and the curation phase.
How do you distinguish between good and bad, just out of curiosity?
It's something we just sort of do internally, as like we kind of like custodians of the data we believe is aligned with Bitcoin. So, I've gone to great lengths to make sure that the person, like it was initially myself that was going through every morning and selecting that. But, it's a Bitcoiner that I trust, and, he's got his mandates, like, is it Austrian economics? Is it, Bitcoin related? Is it within that sphere? What is it? Boom, alternatively, is it like shitcoining? Is it some mainstream crap? What is it? Like, just remove it.
Right.
And
so there's like a parameter criteria where it's like, is it in this box or is it not? And then that's sort of the decision framework.
Pretty much. And this is not to say that, like, a big misconception people have about like the data you feed language models. It's not that the language model actually knows anything about that data. Like, it's not later going to remember, oh, Mises wrote this or fucking Breedlove wrote that or anything. Literally none of that happens in a fine tuning. In a fine tuning, all you're doing is you're changing the probability that the language style that comes out from the model is more like what's been fed in. So like we could, for example, chuck something in there from Vitalik, right? Because he has written some stuff early days about Bitcoin, even though he might not have been 100% pro Bitcoin, but his language style we might deem, useful to put in here, sure. But like we don't need to do that. Like, so we don't need to have like every bit of data in the world. Like, we know that linguistically speaking, or what's the word? Like, I'm trying to find the word here. It's like the direction of how a Bitcoin or an Austrian economist might speak has a certain flavor about it. Like I remember earlier what I said about, like, you ask a mainstream person, oh yeah, Bitcoin, isn't Bitcoin just another crypto with blockchain technology? Versus you ask a Bitcoiner about Bitcoin, yeah, it's sound money. Like it comes from a
Mm.
different place.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the kind of distinction. So there's no like hard and fast rule. It's like this is in, this is out. But it's kind of, like you look at something, you're like, yeah, okay, that's the right flavor, that's the wrong flavor. And we just try and curate that stuff. So then once that's all in there, there's multiple different processes, but like basically what we'll do is we'll take that data, we'll convert it into a text format. So we'll either scrape it, or, if it's a PDF, we'll convert it or whatever we'll do. And then we actually have to break it into chunks. And these chunks, could be 1,000 characters long, 500 characters long, whatever. Like, I think there's some parameters there from a, ingestion standpoint. I don't know the exact specifics, but we break it all down. And that is just done purely blindly and programmatically. We just run a Python program, it breaks it all up. So you have these like chunks with a bit of overlap, which means the chunks can sometimes start like halfway through a sentence and end halfway through a sentence. So it's kind of shit. So to programmatically clean that up, you actually can use another language model to say, hey, please take this paragraph and make it, complete. So it's a broken paragraph, it'll go then make it complete. Now, this is where problems potentially come in, is that if you use, the language models that are available out there through API, which is OpenAI, Google, whatever, usually they'll take the paragraph and they'll re-summarize it in its own sort of
Mm.
words. And if you've ever tried to get ChatGPT to re-summarize a Bitcoin paragraph, you'll see what I mean. It comes out with all of the fucking shit in it. So we have to do all this fucking prompt engineering to make sure that it comes out with the spirit of what was originally said, or as close as possible to what was originally said, but to kind of like close the paragraph off. Now, sometimes that doesn't work very well, which means, all of that data then gets fed to basically a human step. Now, before I explain the human step, there is also other versions of this, which is, it's not just articles and essays that we're doing, we're also doing podcasts. So, we'll transcribe the podcast, we'll break it up, we'll run it through, we'll synthesize it. And then at the other end, some of the stuff you'll get is shit from the podcast, like, what I ate for breakfast or what I did this weekend, like, what Bitcoin podcasts like, people talk about everything. So a lot of that shit's just irrelevant. Like, what, that doesn't need to be in a language model. So that stuff needs to be deleted. And you can do that to a degree programmatically, but it's, at some point you do need a human eye to sort of run through it. So this last step, the human cleanup, is where we basically encourage the Bitcoin community to get involved. Is we say, all right, you can go in there. We've got 3 features: don't trust, verify, we're all Satoshi, and Fat Buster. And the don't trust, verify is the cleanup, the data cleanup component. Is you go in there and all you're doing is you're like doing like Tinder, keep or discard, and you're selecting as a Bitcoiner what you think is relevant, in terms of linguistically speaking, accuracy. Like, does this make sense for a model to say like keep, or what the fuck is it talking about?
I think it's
Discard.
keep, discard, and then I don't know, where it's like I don't have an opinion on this, or I don't know enough about it.
Correct. You can skip it. You can also edit it actually. So, if you see something like close to accurate, you can edit it. You can like remove a word, change some things, whatever. So you can actually put that in there. Now, what we do on the back end is, this data is going to everybody. So we've got like a little consensus model floating in the back, which I can't tell you exactly what that consensus model is because we don't want people to game it. But essentially, we're looking for multiple people to perform the same action. So it's kind of like mining, right? Is like, if you and X amount of other people agree that it should be kept, then it is kept, and you guys are given points. And if someone there decided to discard it, they're more likely out of consensus with the rest of you, so they get no points. And it goes the opposite way around. If a bunch of you agreed that no, this is garbage, 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 but someone decided to keep it, then, well, they're out of consensus, so they get no points, but you guys all get points.
So it's like a
Um,
feedback. It's basically like a way to automate the weeding process through consensus. And the other thing too that I really appreciated was the um, vetting process that you actually have to give information to become part of Spirit of Satoshi, to become a trainer, let's call it. And I think there's something to be said there too, because the more you vet people and sort of do quality control on the front end, the less weeding you end up having to do on the back end, and the more you can kind of curate high signals. So I really appreciated that part of it too, where it's not just like, oh, you sign up, you give your email, and then you're part of it. It's like, no, you actually have, I don't know if
Totally.
there's a human going through it or if there's a piece of software that's running through to approve people, but I feel like that's a big element in creating something just of higher quality.
Totally, totally. So this is I was going to save that for later, but you just hit it on the head, which is that was part of our curation process. We're like, okay, how do we make sure that this just doesn't have a bunch of fuckwits come in and like really,
Yeah.
destroy the data? We're like, okay, well, let's create an intake form. And in intake form, there's a couple trick questions which kind of tell us where someone is, in terms of their Bitcoin thinking. And yeah, like we manually go through those daily because we get applications every day, and then you get submitted into the group and you can be a part of this. And this is like, yeah, as you said, it's extremely important because it's just another layer of increasing the quality, because we're not interested in so much the quantity. Like, we need quantity of data, but if it was just quantity, we would use language models purely to just clean and produce the data
Yeah.
and spit it out the other side. But doesn't mean anything. So like, we want the quality. And this is probably a good place to just say the last feature, which is We're All Satoshi and FUD basically similar features. One's just more focused on FUD, the other one is just general questions, but it allows contributors to not just like verify and clean data, but to also produce data, which is you get a question, and your job as a contributor is to answer the question like you would imagine a Spirit Satoshi language model would answer it. And
As
then
if
that
you were
question,
Satoshi.
exactly, as if you're Satoshi. So that question then goes into the pile of the things that people keep and approve. And if people keep it, you get 10 times the amount of points than as if you were just keeping and approving, keeping and discarding yourself. So it's an incentive to get involved, which leads to the last bit is people are on there earning points, and the points are directly redeemable for sats. And we're still
Yeah.
experimenting how many sats we should be giving away, like how valuable it all is. I think we're probably a little bit on the low side, but we'll probably look to increase that, or we'll probably create some sort of competition so that way on a monthly basis the best contributors like win 50, 100,000, 200,000 sats, like some bigger chunks like that. But yeah, man, it's like it's a process that gets the community engaged. There's a lot of people, as you said earlier, like people complain about a lot of things because there is a lot of things to complain about. But like, unless we become solution oriented, like we can complain to a blue in the face about how woke ChatGPT is and shit like that. Well, fuck yeah,
Yeah.
sure, it is woke. Well, come help build something better, and that's what we're doing.
And yeah, and the thing, because there really is two kinds of people. There's people who complain, and then there's people who see the bullshit and then build something to solve that problem. And what I think is really cool with Spirit of Satoshi is not only have you created a game, like I actually like Saturday is my morning every week where I
Mm-hmm.
just do Bitcoin research. It's like my ritual. Um, you know, my wife knows like I don't interrupt him Saturday mornings because I'm doing self custody cleanup, firmware updates, all that kind of stuff. And part of that is 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes of Spirit of Satoshi contributing. And it's actually a lot of fun. It's kind of turned into a
Mm-hmm.
game. When I got the first 500 sats, I was like, oh shit, this is real. I'm actually getting paid for contributing my energy. And it makes me want to put more time into each answer to just yield, knowing that this could be a tool that's used by millions of people. Is like
Mm-hmm.
I have a
Mm-hmm.
sense of meaning that it's like not only is it a fun game to play where I can actually earn sats by contributing information into this tool, there's actually a deep sense of meaning where it's like this can actually contribute to a lot of people learning about Bitcoin in the right way, in the way that I wish I would have learned about it initially. And so it's actually I think you've just democratized the ability for people to be part of the builder crew without
Mm-hmm.
needing to
Mm-hmm.
build something from scratch themselves because they either don't know how or they just don't have the energy to do it. And so I think that's a pretty special thing. Um, and if anyone does want to get involved, like if there's Bitcoiners listening, the STOA is mainly people who already understand Bitcoin and are curious about new things. Although I hope that eventually it'll be it's the place that I direct people to who don't know anything about Bitcoin and want to just learn. It's where I tried to record episodes that I could send my mom to, where she can learn about money from first principles. And go
Hmm.
through her own journey from start to, advance and understanding Bitcoin. But if there are Bitcoiners listening to this, where do they go to become part of this or learn more about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, really good insight in terms of what you just said there. It's like it's trying to open the door for people to actually, as you said, be builders. I didn't even think of it that way. Like I was always thinking as contributors, but yeah, contributing to this is fundamentally helping build it. So it's a great frame of reference.
And it's like,
Um,
it's not, I think there's very few things that you can actually feel a sense of being part of building something in as little as like 20 minutes a week, right? And it's like
mhm.
if the great pyramids have whatever it is, 2 million blocks, you can be one of 10 people helping to bring one block, and then you could be like, I've done something. And if you want to do more, you
Mhm.
can. But I don't think there's many opportunities to actually see something materializing and seeing it evolve and being able to participate in with as little or as much energy as you want based on your preference, your bandwidth, and all that kind of stuff, where it's
Mhm.
not solely dependent on you. So I think, yeah, you've kind of, like you said, you opened the door of people being able to contribute or help build something, even with a small amount of energy. And I think that, you know, you can either have someone put 1,000 hours into it, or you can have 10,000 people put like, a tenth of an hour. And maybe that's more
Mhm.
scalable. And maybe that actually gets a more diverse set of perspectives as long as those people come from a background of understanding. And so that whole idea where it's like, yes, you want to, there's probably like a fine balance where you want to curate high quality people, but you also don't want it to be a monocrop where it's lacking
Totally.
diversity. So
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
I think the idea of it not being like this giant commitment actually fosters that, which is cool.
Totally, totally. Yeah. So to answer then your second question is how do people get involved? Spiritofsatoshi.ai. Simple as that. It's on there. There's two buttons where, one is to submit stuff to the repository, and the other one is to apply to train Satoshi. And I mean the application, like people shouldn't be afraid of it. Like it's, it'll take you 5 minutes just to answer a couple questions. And tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and everything. But yeah, it's super easy. You get in there, we try and approve daily, except for the weekends. And then yeah, people can get in there, earn some sats. Like there's a new leaderboard, and as I said, like now that we've kind of got like the leaderboard in place, and we've got a couple things cleaned up. Starting next month, we're going to start doing like weekly and monthly giveaways to sort of really incentivize people to just do a little bit more.
Do you have ways for people to donate sats who want to contribute to some of those, like um, the sats that are getting paid out? Is there? I don't know if this
Yeah,
is
coming
because I haven't
soon.
seen it. Coming
Yeah,
soon.
coming
Okay,
soon. So I want to. I've got a call with guys next week, and I want to do like a guys
cool.
fund with the boys, so that way we can raise some money for that. Because at the moment we're just paying it all out ourselves.
Yeah.
And but at some stage we'll definitely want to do like some sort of crowd fund to encourage people. Because we just did a. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a young kid out of Africa called Master Guantai, and he does a lot of translations of like English work into. He speaks like 4 or 5 African languages, so he's kind of like translating stuff into African languages. He's
Cool.
um he's also doing like YouTube videos and Twitter posts and all that sort of stuff about Bitcoin, and his audience and those people are like the perfect archetype to go in and contribute here, because like for you and I, like making 5-10,000 sats, whatever, it's like it's cool, but
I
we're
still
not
get
doing it for
a
the money.
bump of dopamine out of it.
You do get the bump of dopamine, but it's like it's not life-changing money, like, but for
Yeah.
them it's actually something meaningful. Like
True.
so we'll definitely want to do a bit of a fundraise for that, because that money's all going to go to them.
That's amazing. And yeah, I haven't been involved with it for that long, but even in the brief period of time, I've seen a lot of updates in terms of like the evolution of the dashboard, the evolution of the types of data in there, being paid sats, seeing the leaderboard. It's really cool to see in real time the updates that are being made and the evolution of this organism that is still kind of embryonic, but I think has a shitload of potential and really like magnetized me because I see you know, the problem of effectively orange pilling people at scale has been sort of something where I was like, well, maybe there's no solution. Maybe it literally just has to happen through local networks having a node that then can form channels with other people in the local network. But I think this software solution being something that I can refer, like the health network that's focused on feet that I work for has, probably between all their connections, probably like 300,000 people. It's like there's no way of orange pilling those people on a person-to-person basis, but there is, if there was a way to direct them to a tool that I knew left them in good hands and would give them truth, that's a pretty powerful tool. Regardless of how many people use it, it's just knowing that that's there allows us to sort of meet the demand for education that there's going to be and make sure that none of those curious people get led astray, which I think is it's way easier to get led astray today than it is to be led down a good path. And I think that just creating a tool that Bitcoiners can actually, and here's the thing, if you're a Bitcoiner and you help build this, you're not going to recommend anyone to any other tool. Right? And the idea that any Bitcoiner can be part of helping to build this, whether they get paid sats or not, it's like, this is a fucking meaningful thing. And it's not, it's like I'm doing this so that my daughter in 10 years can have a tool that she can use to learn about Bitcoin that is better than I could ever do. Right? She can read all the books, but the idea that all the different people reading all the books, doing all the podcasts, coming to their own insights can collectively compile their insights together to come to this just greater collective intelligence than could be achieved otherwise. That's some cool shit. So yeah, thank you for creating. Actually, there's one thing while I have your ear. I know that there was mention that you're going to start to do bounties, and those bounties will be shared on Telegram. Is there any future plans to share the bounties or post the bounties on the leaderboard online instead of Telegram? Because I have to limit the amount of tech platforms I use, but I don't want to miss out on seeing what those are and keeping up to date.
Totally, yeah. We're gonna try and drive more of the communication onto the actual app itself, and at some point, at the moment it's just web-based. Once we have a little bit more resources, we'll turn it into something more app-based, so that way it's we can integrate notifications, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, definitely, Telegram's just useful because it's a place to sort of get people in. But man, as you know, Telegram's such a shit show, man. It's just noise. So, and it's hard to keep up with everything. So yeah, definitely.
Cool. Excited to see how it evolves. For everyone listening, thanks for being here. Thanks for your attention. We don't take it lightly, and we hope that this episode stimulated a little bit of curiosity. Maybe go check out spiritofsatoshi.ai, see what you can contribute or see what's going on there. Aleks, thanks for being here. Thanks for spearheading this, because it is, you do a lot of things. You're right.
Thank you, bro.
You compile a really cool piece of, I would say a written artifact with the Bitcoin Times. You do a lot of things. So thank you for spending the energy to do this. Let people know, just before we wrap up, where they can find out more about you, what you write. You've already let people know, spiritofsatoshi.ai. So yeah, let people know where they can find you on the internet, whatever you're working on right now. And then we'll wrap up.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the kind words. I sometimes feel like I'm doing too many things and need to kind of simplify, but who knows? It's a vigor and a vitality for life that drives me. But yeah, people, if they want to find out more about me, Svetski writes WRITES on Twitter, and that's usually where I sort of have stuff if people want to reach out. But yeah, man, thank you once again for having me. I hope that people found this useful, insightful in any way. I do, if people are interested in the AI topic itself more specifically, if they search for authentic intelligence on Substack. I haven't written there in a while, but there is some essays in there which kind of dig into the question of intelligence and consciousness and stuff like that, and kind of try and dispel some of the myths. And particularly if they're interested in that conversation about how language models are a step change in AI, and they're dangerous, but not for the reasons people think. It's not because AGI is going to pop up tomorrow and kill us all, but what we were discussing earlier about your entire model of the world becomes the lens through which you view it, which is the problem with Google today. So that's really what we're trying to combat. So if people are interested in that sort of topic, authentic intelligence on Substack, go check that out. But yeah, spiritofsatoshi.ai, get involved. And if you're interested in more of my ramblings, Twitter, Svetski writes.
Dope. So thanks everyone for listening. Again, if you want to listen to these podcasts on Fountain, you get paid sats for doing so. And then you can also boost the episode if you enjoy the content. Ciao for now. Catch you next time.